Okay, and let's go ahead and turn to, in my recollection is that we were on module 4, right? When we finished last time of chapter 6. So we will start there, of course. And just a quick reminder about the material in chapter 6 dealing mostly with information technology. It is a heavy area on the exam. I think that sometimes as you're going through all the material, you've got the first 5 chapters, and it's kind of human nature to say, okay, this is the last chapter, I'm not going to spend as much time with it. Meanwhile, this material is heavily tested on the exam, and you add to that it's not exactly, this most stimulating, interesting information. At least that's probably more, my assessment, because I'm an accountant and I like to crunch numbers. And meanwhile, there's very little of that. It's highly definitional type stuff in an area that maybe some of us don't focus as much on. So I'm going to continue the approach that I had with the first half of this chapter, which is giving you lots and lots of flashcard suggestions and ways of thinking about the information that we're providing that'll help you to kind of categorize it in your head so that you can get through the multiple choice questions and task-based simulation that you will likely have in this area. Okay, so we're going to talk about data analytics now. And data analytics is something that is becoming more and more prominent. A lot of the firms use data analytics, CPA firms use data analytics software and whatnot to conduct their audits. Companies use data analytics to figure out things ranging from what do their customers like to buy to what are the areas in the country where our products are selling the most. There are a variety of things that our data analytics are used for now. If you're a person that searches on the internet for different products and stuff you might want to buy, I'm sure you've had the experience where the next day you all of a sudden get an email for something you were looking at earlier, or all of a sudden you see on your Facebook a feed that is related to something that you searched on Google or something. Sometimes I think they're listening. I'll be talking to my friends about something when my cell phone is present, and all of a sudden I get, feeds on my Facebook that are related to some subject conversation that I had. I'm like, huh? I think they are listening. Well, all of that is data analytics. They're taking all of this information and they're creating different relationship tables and whatnot, so they know how to market to you, how to feed you data. And again, as auditors, since we're all kind of studying for the CPA, as auditors, we can use those same sort of analysis to make different determinations about our clients and the fair presentation of their information. Or maybe we're being asked to be a consultant and give them some thoughts. Or you could even use, although we don't really talk about it here, data analytics in the tax field as well. So growing area, and so we need to make sure that we're comfortable with the, again, highly definitional information that we're going to be seeing in this chapter. So you come down and let's look at this notion of big data, okay? And the term big data has been used, but generally refers to corporate accumulation of massive amounts of data that can be used for analysis, commonly referred to as data analytics. And I gave you some examples of some of the things. They use it sometimes to annoy us, right? But it is something that is a useful tool for business, right? So coming over, and let's just take a look at some definitions here. And I don't know, this is somebody saying that there's something called the Big Five of data analytics. Okay, that sounds a little jargonistic to me. But let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, I don't know if I need to mute some.
佢嗰個有個 AR entry 啊 ，GL 我有個 something I think it's RP.
I always do that because I don't want to hear somebody say how horrible instructor they think I am, because that'll hurt my feelings. So I mute folks if they forget to mute themselves. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. And again, definitions, guys. So I'm going to need you to flashcard some of these. Volume. represents the quantity or amount of data points. Volume is also a factor in the size of data in terms of storage requirements. Some data points consume more data storage capacity than others. For example, data that is simply plain text is transmitted more quickly and requires less storage space than a video or audio file. Also, even though they don't really talk about it here, volume is important when it comes to processing data as well, right? The more data you have to process, you have in volume, the longer it would take to process it, okay? Velocity refers to the speed of the data accumulation. I don't think we need to consider much more than that in that definition. Variety references the range of data types, and there are three general categories of data: unstructured, structured, and semi-structured. So include on your flashcards some examples of what structured, or the definition of what structured versus unstructured mean. It kind of ends up being like, that's it, that's all they're explaining to me here. So structured data represents data with a defined organizational format that has specific parameters such as numerical or alphabetic characters. Unstructured data is the exact opposite, meaning if it's not structured, it's unstructured. And then semi-structured is a hybrid of these two formats. Okay, so it's more as opposed to, you know, some sort of, you know, mind-blowing explanation here of what these different things mean. Just understand that variety are grouped into these three categories of structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Veracity, okay, veracity relates to the reliability of the data. I just want you to put that one word, reliability. How reliable is the data for whatever analysis we're doing, right? Okay, veracity. Value refers to the insights that the data can yield. Okay, what can it tell us? What can it uncover for us? What can it allow us to understand? Okay, that's the value. Okay, so just go ahead and flashcard those. Now you come over and we start to talk about data governance, big data governance. And these are really, you know, some pretty important considerations here. And as I was going through this material today, and we're going to start getting into information technology management, data management, some of the later modules here tonight. And it's all about risks and controls, and data is at risk. Make no mistake about it. There is a constant, you know, attempt to extract inappropriately data from companies. And so they're having to put quite a bit of, you know, safeguards up over that. And now with the Ukraine situation, we're hearing that, you know, it's not basically what the federal government is saying, what the Biden administration is saying. It's not a question of if, but when there's going to be some sort of attack, right? So this is a big deal, okay? This is really a big deal. So let's go ahead and put some flashcards around this, but we start with this idea as there are ethical and legal concerns pertaining to the organization itself, its employees, customers, and stakeholders, okay? So providing guidance on how sensitive data should be captured, maintained, disposed of during its life cycle in the company's possession is very important, because again, you're controlling data that could harm somebody if it were somehow hacked or leaked or whatever, okay? So let's just go ahead and let's flashcard some of these concerns. One, dealing with data confidentiality, okay? Let's take a look at data confidentiality. Why don't you go ahead and flashcard right here too, okay? Just flashcard this whole idea of data governance. And then let's go ahead and flashcard some of this. And guys, when I ask you for a flashcard, I just want you to flashcard the stuff that I'm highlighting, okay? So data confidentiality is a concern. Example of data confidentiality include employee records, banking financial data, trade secrets, marketing strategies, etc. Obviously, companies need to protect the information, not only for their own company, but information that they may hold for customers or whatever that is confidential. Privacy. Now, privacy is a little bit different than confidentiality, and that privacy of data is often regulated by various statutes. For example, when we're talking about health information, there's an act called the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. And this act is putting strict requirements on how we maintain health information that we may collect for our customers and whatnot, because obviously health information is highly confidential, right? So to maintain compliance, organizations must implement strong governance surrounding what type of data can be collected, what disclosures to make as the data is collected, and what controls should be in place to protect that data. So if you're going to be collecting some health information about a client, a customer, or something, you have to be very careful about how you protect that information. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard those concepts I highlighted there about data privacy. Coming over to the next page and continuing some of our considerations here. When we talk about big data ethics, okay, and flashcard that big data ethics organizations, okay, right here, I'm going to highlight, should attempt to eliminate bias in the algorithms applied in decision support models. Although it might be appropriate to market only to women for women's athletic retailer, organizations without a niche focus may want to avoid making general exclusion on the basis of gender. And so I think we're all aware of that. So that's something that's important to consider, okay? And then finally, you come over governance responsibility, and organizations' governance programs should be led by a designated individual, such as a chief privacy officer or a corporate compliance or somebody with a similar or equivalent job role, okay? So go ahead and flashcard these. I think that you know, they're not difficult concepts to understand as to what we're talking about here, but I don't know, I don't wake up in the morning with the notion of data ethics on my mind, right? So you need to have some flashcards around this stuff just to make sure it's in your pile, so that when you're getting to the exam site, you're going to get to the exam site, what, an hour early, right? You're going to get to the exam site an hour early. You're going to park your car in whatever parking is available there at the Prometric exam site, and you're going to do another round with your flashcards just before you walk into the exam. You can't take your flashcards into the exam site with you. Now, don't walk in with them in there. But in your car, you should do one more round of your flashcards just before walking in, so that you walk into the exam like this. Don't let anything spill out of your head, and then dump it all on the exam itself. And this is the kind of stuff that you really need to attribute to, you know, memory, right? Rote memory, to be able to do well on these concepts. Okay. Okay, good. Let's come over and let's take a look at data management. Okay, data management. And when we look at data management, there's something called relational databases, and it allows data to be stored in different tables. And these tables are linked through relationships using key fields. This differs from more traditional methods of storage, such as flat files, which are files that contain plain text with no structural relationship. Okay, so what we're going to see is we're going to take data and we're going to place them in relational tables, and that's going to allow us to connect, say, customer to sales, customer to location, by having them in these relational fields. Now, as an auditor, what we would always do is we would request from a client, say federal agency, when I worked for the Government Accountability Office, we would always request the data in a flat file, and then we would put it into the relational databases and whatnot, so we could do the different analysis that we want. So often as auditors, we ask for the data in a flat file, and then we build our own relational tables so that we can do the various analysis that we want. But companies that are trying to figure out marketing strategies and whatnot will take the data, put them in the relational tables so they can do the different analyses that they want. I don't know why I'm putting an extra S in analysis. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at some relational concepts. Okay, and these really, the key word here is concepts. These are concepts, and I'm going to ask you to flashcard. Okay, so what happens? We have the different concepts, and we have the tables, and tables are organizational structure with relational databases that establish columns, rows to store specific types of records. For example, a customer table, okay, would have where we would store all the customer records. Okay, we can have attributes, and the attributes you can recognize as the columns. So within the rows of all the different customers, we would have columns. For example, we could have a column for the first name and the last name of a particular customer row that we have in the table. Okay, so we take a look at the rows here, and rows are within a table in relational databases. Each record contains information about one entity within the table. For example, a record in the customer table would provide certain information about a single customer. So we have the columns, their first name, their last name, and then we continue down that row with their, I don't know, date of first purchase, date of last purchase, that sort of thing, whatever it is, we're trying to collect data on that. Okay, and then we come over and we have fields, and field is a space created in the intersection of the column and the row. The information placed inside the field is also known as a data value. Okay, and then we have data types, and data types tell us the category of data, and it could be numerical, it could be alphabetical. So we can see that could be string of characters, etc. Okay, all right. So flashcard those concepts, and then let's for the relational databases, and then let's start to get some more definitions here, which is going to also be flashcarded. And these are database keys, and there's a primary key and a foreign key. So I'm probably suggesting 2 flashcards here. So it's flashcards times 2. One would be a flashcard that would list off the 2 types of data keys, which is primary key and foreign key. And then the second flashcard, okay, I guess I'll instead put times 2 here. The second flashcard for each of these, so it's actually 3 flashcards, will give us the definition of primary key versus foreign key. Okay, so a primary key are unique identifiers for a specific row within the table that are made up of more attributes. Okay, so for example, a unique identifier would be Social Security number in the United States, because each one is unique to each citizen. Foreign key, and foreign keys are attributes in one table that are also primary keys in another. For example, customer ID may be the primary key in the customer table. However, it is a foreign key in the sales table, because we're trying to link the customer name to sales to that customer, right? Meanwhile, if we're looking at sales and what we had sold, that would be the primary key in the sales, and the customer ID would be the foreign key, and then we're going to try to link those up. So if you take a look and make sure you know what flashcards I want to have you make there. But when we take a look at the relationships, okay, we link primary keys with foreign keys in another table. So let's just kind of play with this a little bit. So notice that we have what? We have a customer in the and their account number is the primary key in the customer table, and then we're going to do what? We're going to link that to account number, which is a foreign key in the orders, so we know what the customer has ordered. So maybe a customer calls us and says, hey, where's my order? Okay, what's your customer number? Boom, it links us up to the order key. So maybe we can answer a particular question about whatever they're asking us. Or you can sit here and you can sit there and see that we have what? We have a shipment. So if the customer called and said, okay, has my stuff been shipped yet? Okay, we can answer that question, et cetera, through these relational tables. Okay. Okay, good. Now, anytime you're going to do an analysis and you have, say, a client that's going to be giving you a lot of data, or you're in charge of managing this database, your databases inside of the company, you want to maintain or at least acquire from a client, let's say, a data dictionary, okay, which is also referred to as a metadata. And it provides information about the data in the database. Okay, so it basically provides different features like a description of the data, field size and length, and whether the data is a primary or foreign key or non-key attribute, etc. This is very important, that as you acquire that data, you are able to start to do different analysis on it. You don't understand how the data is organized, you're going to be having some problems. So you're going to want a data dictionary to help guide you along through that process. Okay, coming over database views, they're broken down into two broad categories: logical and physical. Logical databases is how the data appears to the user. Physical database pertains to how the data is actually stored within the database. And so I think that needs much more explanation than that. There's the way the machine looks at the data versus the way the user looks at the data, right? So just go ahead and flashcard those definitions. Data in queries and reports. As we extract the data, it is typically done through query queues, tools, most commonly using program languages, and some of these have, I think, terminology you probably heard. Common one is SQL, Structured Query Language. Okay, and so when we have that sort of system, English sentence pattern to the code to be relatively easy to write and interpret. Common commands include select, from, and where, and you use this language to instruct the machine how to go ahead and query and then provide different reports that you then use for your analysis. Okay, and they give us a example up here of a query using SQL, which is, select customer ID, from where, customer table, where, from, customer table, where, customers from Virginia. Okay, and you can, with some training, of course, pretty easily learn how to use SQL. Okay, now we've talked about how to acquire the data, get the data dictionary, etc. And now you can start to perform the actual data analytics, and that is what they call the ETL process. And it's basically extract the data, transform the data, and load the data, and then you're going to be able to do your various analysis. Okay, so nothing very earth-shattering here as you go through these, but let's just look at some of the considerations in each one of those, starting with the data extraction. Data extraction can take the form of an automated process, semi-automated, or manual extraction. So first thing, and this to me is one of the more forgotten about the importance of a step, which is the data identification. I think that sometimes, because there's so much data out there, it is tempting to sit there and say, well, let's just look at everything, and I used to tell my teams, I'm like, guys, what do we want to answer? And what is the information that's going to allow us to effectively answer that question? Otherwise, we're just going to get lost in a bunch of, proliferous, if you will, analysis. Okay, so you want to think carefully about your data identification. And the first step in the extraction process is to understand the issue the business is trying to address to ensure data request has the proper scope to resolve it. And it's, pretty important that you know what you're trying to answer before you just start extracting data. I mean, maybe I seem a little annoyed because I'd always try to make that point. I would have folks say, well, let's look at everything so we don't miss anything. And I'm like, no, let's figure out what we're trying to answer and let's go after that information, okay? And in doing that, and it's very important, it allows you to consider risk that exist in the data, okay? If you know what you're trying to answer, and then you understand something about that data, then you know that, well, wait a minute, there's certain holes in this data that is going to somehow possibly bias our answer or maybe have us come to the wrong conclusion. For example, I was on an assignment looking at public debt. We were doing a financial statement audit. The Bureau of Public Debt prepares a schedule called the Schedule of Public Debt, where they show the beginning balance of public debt, what was issued, what was redeemed, ending balance of public debt. And we were looking at, we got assigned the auction issue process in San Francisco. Auction issues where they auction off the securities and then they issue them to the various individuals that won the auction of Treasury securities. And we had to work with Federal Reserve banks to do that. And because in the Federal Reserve system, only 3 banks actually issue the securities: San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. And because we were out here in San Francisco, they said, well, since San Francisco is one of the office that leads that, that does that actual auction issue, John, you're going to lead the auction issue cycle. Okay, great. So when we're looking at the data and trying to see how that auction issue process works, one of the things we found out by understanding that we wanted to see the electronic tenders when they tender an offer to buy the security during the auction part, we understood by carefully understanding why we needed to get those tenders that there were so many of something that they call paper tenders. So we were all hopped up on extracting the data electronically. Meanwhile, there was this other piece down there that wasn't electronic, it was paper. And so we had to go through a process to understand, well, to have a complete universe of tenders, we're going to have to figure out some way of dealing with the paper tenders. So what we did was we carved off a separate sample of just paper tenders, and then the large bulk of the information, of course, was in electronic form. I don't know that they accept paper tenders anymore. I think now it's all electronic tenders, but that was at a time when they were still accepting some paper tenders. Anyway, not the most interesting story in the world, but the kind of thing that you need to think about when you're doing your data identification. Okay, good. Now you come over and then we are going to obtain the data. And when you obtain the data, there are application programming interfaces. And the classic one, the one that we used in GAO, and I think is probably the most popular, is something called IDEA. IDEA is produced by, I don't know if it's the Canadian government or a Canadian company. I'm not sure which they are. I don't know, maybe somebody knows if it's the government or it's a private company. But this Canadian organization, they developed this software called IDEA. And what's nice about IDEA is you go ahead and you ask for that. Remember I was talking about getting the flat file. You get the flat file and then you use IDEA to help you to do some of these things that we're talking about, organizing the data into tables and whatnot, and then going ahead and doing the various analysis that you want to do, queries and whatnot, all using IDEA. And so when you obtain that data, you generally will ask for it in a flat file, and then you run IDEA against that file and it extracts any information that you would like to take out of those files. Okay, so the a application programming interface like IDEA is the means to which you can connect to the resource application where the data is housed, and then you can go ahead and extract that. And that's that's pretty great, because you sit there and you ask IDEA to, you program IDEA to pull, say, a sample of transactions. You go home, the machine runs, and the next morning there's your sample. Okay, so these software are pretty useful. Okay, going over to the next, and they talk about requesting the data. And what I find, interesting about the way textbooks write about requesting data, it sounds like you get one shot. You request the data, and if you don't ask the question exactly correct, you're stuck with what you get. There's probably a negotiation process both before, during, and after the request. So you're requesting the data, but you're talking a lot beforehand about the data, so you understand things like, oh wait, there's these paper tenders over here, whatever. Then you'll provide what data you want, and if you have somebody that is good on the other side, they'll probably come back and say, well, do you want it like this or like that, because there is this issue, and oh, okay, then we need this. Then maybe you run some quick analysis and look at the data and you say, wait a minute, this isn't exactly, and you probably will go back again, and then they'll do a second run. So it's not like you just get one shot to request the data perfectly, okay? And you take a look, let's say if submitting a request for the data, the recipient of the request must be provided with full details as what is needed. And again, yeah, but there's a lot to that. There's a lot of discussion back and forth, but it includes things like the data file type, format, time period, required attributes, and then you also need a process to validate the output to verify that no data was lost. So what you would probably do is you would sit there and understand that there's going to be a record count before you request that data, right? And then when you get the answer to that, when you get the actual request is filled, you get the data, that should match to what the total amount of records that was stated that was in the system to what you actually received, right? So there's a little reconciliation there. I was on an assignment where we were looking at housing agencies. I think I've mentioned this assignment in class before. And we were looking to see if housing agencies if there were indicators of particular financial problems with housing agencies. And so what we decided to do was download from the federal government's commerce website's clearinghouse of all single audit reports and all financial reports of housing agencies. We wanted to download every single housing agency's financial reports. So we have a database that's sitting there that now is supposedly the financial information of every housing agency in the entire country. We wanted to compare that to the scores that HUD gave to those housing agencies, and they give different scores, and one of them is a financial status score. Because what we wanted to see is, could we look at the financial statements, see potential indicators of problems, and see that HUD maybe was giving them a good score. Thus, we would find a mismatch in the way we were looking at the financial reports versus the way HUD was looking at them. So we wanted to make sure that we had all the housing agencies' financial reports. So we had to sit there and make sure that we had as many financial reports as HUD had financial scores for those housing agencies. And then, of course, we reconciled that first before you start running the analysis, so that you know that you have full database here, full database here. And then we could go ahead and do the analysis, and we could compare the score, the financial score for each housing agency with different line items on the financial statements. And by doing that, we were able to identify, I think it was something like 300 plus, like 310, 330 housing agencies that reported on their financial statements that they had a liability for what they called outstanding checks. And again, this is through discussion with HUD and our own study and whatnot. We've finally learned that outstanding checks listed as a liability were checks that the housing agency had bounced they had written funds in excess of the amount that was available in their bank accounts. And if you bounce a check, that is a liability, yeah. But they had to have this cute little name called outstanding checks. Meanwhile, it was bounced checks. So we downloaded the financial reports of every housing agency, made sure we could match it to the financial score. And then we looked, did any housing agency list an amount for outstanding checks on their financial reports while having a high financial score in HUD system? And like I was saying, we found plus 300 plus, that they were bouncing checks. Meanwhile, HUD system was saying that they had a good financial score. And so what we were able to determine was that HUD really wasn't giving that particular line item the proper weight in determining whether the housing agency was financially sound. And we recommended, therefore, that they do that when the financial reports are submitted to their real estate assessment center, that they do that particular analysis and have that feed in properly to that score, so that then they'll see that that score is coming down, and they'll be able to do some corrective measures with that housing agency before it finally gets to a point where they're in such bad shape, they're going into receivership, bankruptcy, that sort of stuff. So that's the kind of analysis. And I think I probably went beyond just the idea of requesting the data, but you do have to do that reconciliation. Okay. Now you can do a manual extraction. Manually extracting the data, a person may use a specialized data mining software or write customized queries to obtain the data. And again, that basically is, those IDEA software, for example, would be something that you could use as a data mining software. Tools used must ensure the data is coming from the correct location and is complete and accurate. Okay, good. Then you come over and let's take a look at the next page. And now we're going to transform the data. So we've got this data. We made sure that we had complete data. We did all the process, etc. And now we can transform the data. So one of the more time-consuming steps is transforming the data so that we can use it for our analysis. And so you can see that we're going to have to clean it. We're going to have to validate it to ensure that it is accurate and ready for analysis. So let's go ahead and take a look at cleaning the data. Okay, and let's flashcard these because I hear that talked about a lot. And sometimes I feel like people talk about cleaning the data because it's maybe one of the few things in the whole process they understand. Okay. And so I could see maybe somebody writing a CPA exam question. Remember, the AICPA hires individuals to write questions. They hire their members. If you're a member of the AICPA, every now and then you'll get an email and it'll say, would you be interested in writing CPA exam questions? And I'm always like, oh, that might be interesting. And then I read the fine print down there and they say, you cannot be involved in any preparation of CPA students in order to do this. And okay, that counts me out. I wouldn't be able to do that because I'm involved in preparing CPA students for the exam. But let's just go ahead and take a look. When you think about that, so it could be somebody like me who just is interested in writing questions, and they look and they feel that they understand something about cleaning data and they write a question about it. So we're going to be stuck having to flashcard some of this. Okay, so first off, the following steps: knowing what attributes are needed and formatting those attributes. Okay, if there are duplicate data points, you're going to want to remove those. Okay, address missing fields, something that is blank. That's something that comes up sometimes. And for example, on that HUD assignment I was talking about, when we did the match, we ended up with so many housing agencies where we had the financial report, but no financial score number. And then we had some for which there was no financial score number, but we had a financial report for them. So you got to reconcile that kind of stuff. What's going on? Okay, do we have duplicates? Are we missing some? Whatever. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that would be involved in cleaning the data. Remove attributes that do not add value to your analysis, because remember, when you start processing that, if you don't remove those attributes, they're going to slow down your analysis, and they have the opportunity to maybe invalidate your analysis somehow if you're moving things around that aren't relevant or valid or relevant to whatever your analysis is. Ensure the data is reasonable by performing spot checks, okay? And remove sensitive information that is not necessary for the analysis. No sense in holding on to that data. And use trimming tools to remove unneeded or extra spaces, okay? And again, that will help speed the processing of that data. That's probably why you'd want to do that, as well as you just don't want something stupid to happen, like, well, because there was a space here, what happened after we ran the analysis is that we listed, 10 things that were meeting the attribute we were looking for, but really the machine accidentally mistook that blank space for what we thought we were looking for. Okay, so you don't want stuff like that to happen. Okay, good. Coming over, and the next step in transforming the data is to validate the data. So you can do things like look at minimum, maximum, averages, sums to ensure that the data has maintained its integrity, right? So if I'm processing 3,000 housing agencies against 3,000 scores, I should get 3,000 outputs of connections of the scores versus whatever the output is of that. There should be 3,000 outputs comparing the scores to the financial statements. Okay, or let's say another thing you could do there, I don't know if we did this, like I've told you before, sometimes I have audit flashbacks where I'll sit up in bed in the middle of the night and go, oh, why didn't we do that? Okay, so this is 8 years after retiring from that job. Okay, so be careful. You want to be an auditor, you may spend the rest of your life having, post-traumatic stress syndrome from audits. But I had what I'm not sure we did, but what you could do, let's say there were, I'm just going to make this up. Let's say there were 20 line items on the financial reports that we want to look at. Well, if we have If we have 300 housing agencies, what's that? 20 times 300 is what? 20 times 300. Then we should have what? We should have 6,000 comparisons, shouldn't we? Okay, so you'd want to see, hey, did the output give us 6,000 lines of comparison? Not that you're going to read through every line of comparison, but then you could say, okay, give me those in which the score was, above a certain amount, which indicates good. Meanwhile, there was an amount posted inside of that line item outstanding checks, right? Okay, there should be at least 6,000 outputs of that then that analysis is run against. Then you know that everything got compared line by line for each housing agency. Okay, so that kind of thing is the kind of validating steps you'd want to do. Okay, loading the data. Okay, and when you load the data, by the way, just a full disclosure, it sounds like I was sitting there doing all those things, and that's not true. There was somebody that was just, she just could kill with this kind of stuff at GAO. The thing that was a little bit annoying was that at first they said, well, can you put this person on your assignment because we can't find anything for her to do. And then I said, sure, she can come on the assignment. And then I was good at figuring out, let's compare this to this. Let's see if when they say this, they say that. Can you do that? And she was the one that knew how to do all these things. Okay, yeah, I'll do the query and we'll get the relation to database and we'll sit there and we'll, first we got to clean the data and first we got to do this, we got to do that. What do you want me to do? Because I have so many that aren't matching. And so she knew what she was doing in terms of all these things. I was somewhat in tune to what she was doing, because obviously I had to understand how it connected to the overall quality of the job. But she was actually the one doing all these things. So anyway, so you come over and we talk about loading the data. Okay, so the final step of the ETLs is to load the data in the software program for analysis into a data storage location. When loading the data into software program, the main concern is the data has been extracted and transformed in a way that is compatible with the software. Okay, so go ahead and flashcard that. And then data storage, and you can have operational data storage, okay, are often sources for data warehouses and used to capture ongoing operational activities for a variety of input systems. Okay, so we're kind of slipping back a little bit more into some just definitions. So flashcard that. A data warehouse are very large repositories that are centralized, okay, can be utilized rather than for transaction purposes. Okay, there can be data marts. Okay, data mart is much like a data warehouse, but is more focused for specific purposes such as marketing or logistics. Okay, so it's kind of like the difference between, hey, the data is all in the warehouse versus the data is now in the store, right? So hey, yeah, you go to Safeway's warehouse, they'll have stuff all over the place. You actually go to the Safeway store, the produce in the produce, the meat is in the meat department, et cetera, right? And then data lake is a repository, my highlighter, is a repository similar to a data warehouse, but it contains both structured and structured data, with mostly being natural or raw format. They call that a data lake. Okay, and you can flashcard that. Those are all definitions. Coming down, data storage requirements, okay, and we have entity integrated versus referential integrity. Okay, so primary keys for entity integrity must be utilized for a database to establish and maintain integrity. This means each table must have a unique primary key as a record identifier. Referential integrity databases are relational in nature. A change to a primary key in one table must also cause a change in any related foreign keys to which the table is linked. Okay, so you want to maintain, as you make changes between the entity integrity and the referential integrity. Otherwise, you're going to run a query later and the things aren't going to give you the results that you're trying to give you meaningful results, valuable results. Okay, all right, let's come over, guys. And as I told you, lots and lots and lots of definitions here. So let's keep going. And the following are key data storage attributes. Okay, relevance. Okay, does the data relate to whatever we're trying to answer? Elements to be included and excluded, and relationships between elements included, including validity, completeness, and accuracy. And again, you can flashcard those, but you can do a variety of procedures that sort of what we talked about, some of the reconciliation, to make sure, to me, completeness, well, all this is important, really. Completeness, accuracy, validity of the data are all important things, but completeness is the one that I think can really mess you up if you're not careful, making sure that you have a complete set of records on both sides of whatever analysis you're doing. Types of loading. You can do an initial full loading. That's when you first bring the data into the repository. Obviously, you're going to have to upload a complete set of records, right? Then you could either, from that point forward, do incremental loading or fresh. They don't say reloading, but it's really a fresh reloading. Okay, so under incremental loading, only the difference between existing data and new data are added to the repository. Or as data changes, you could just go ahead and replace the previous full load. Okay, and it really depends on how much effort's going to be involved in a incremental loading versus fresh. if the effort in a full refresh is not that cumbersome, then I would think that's what you would do, because there's no chance of losing data in that incremental loading process. Okay, good. And then once the data is loaded, there needs to be some sort of reconciliation, verification to make sure that no data is lost. Okay, so we've got all of this process. We requested the data, we extracted the data, we cleaned the data, we loaded the data. We did all these things. Now, after all that upfront process, now we can go ahead and start to do the analysis. So data analytics is the process of taking the raw data and transforming that into insights that can solve business problems, audit questions, whatever, right? So let's just come over and let's start to take a look at the types of data analytics. And so we could have, and guys, what I want you to do is highlight at a high level the types of data analytics. I'm saying highlight, but flashcard at a high level. What are the types of data analytics? What are the 4 types of data analytics? And 1 is descriptive, just number these. 2 is diagnostic, okay, coming over, down a little bit. 3 is predictive. And by the way, if you're taking the auditing course too, you're probably having that, deja vu moment. Where have I heard this before? We talked about this in audit as well, right? Okay, so you have predictive analysis coming down, you have prescriptive analysis. Okay, so those are going to be the 4 types, and then we're going to go ahead and under these, where it seems appropriate, we're going to add some flashcards under these. But right now, I just want a flashcard of the steps at a high level. So these are sort of the outcomes now as we go through and we start to look at some of these. And so we can sort the data into relevant ranges or patterns. We can analyze the data based on characteristics such as age, location, okay? That's a descriptive analytic that can be done. Diagnostic analytics tell us why something happened, okay? For example, performing a correlation analysis between 2 or more variables in a set to explain why the data points changed, okay? So, well, gee, when X changed, Y changed. That's the reason, that's the diagnosis, right? We could also come down to predictive analysis. And when we do predictive analysis, regression analysis can come up with a mathematical model that'll actually predict how things are going to go forward. And we talked about regression analysis in another one of our BEC classes, but remember, we said, well, you could use regression analysis to predict the number of direct labor hours to your overhead cost, to see if you have a correct driver of your overhead cost that you use to allocate your overhead to your products. And then you could use that to go, which is sort of a descriptive thing if you're looking at historical data, but then you can use that historical data for predictive analysis, which will say, well, okay, in the future then, as we incur these many direct labor hours, this would be the overhead cost per direct labor hour, and you use that to come up with a predetermined overhead rate. Okay, so you can use regression analysis to see, using data from the past, a descriptive thing, to then use that to, or a diagnostic thing, to then use that to create a predictive type of analysis. Okay, good. Now you come over and prescriptive analysis then basically says, well, since this has been the case in the past and we've got some predictive, here's how you will achieve a certain outcome. Okay, so you take a look, and common prescriptive analysis techniques, and I want you to flashcard these, are artificial intelligence, okay, machine learning. And then we also have a scenario, which is what if analysis. Well, if this has happened in the past, and we can predict that if we do this, this is going to happen. And so what if we change this variable or this factor, right? Okay, that would be more of a prescriptive analysis. Coming over and taking a look and common uses of data analytics. And why don't we just go ahead and flashcard these at a high level? Okay, I think some of these are very self-explanatory. For example, we can use it for customer marketing analysis. We can use it for managerial and operational analytics. I've already talked about the application for, say, coming up with a predetermined overhead rate. Risk and compliance analytics. Organizations can monitor their transactions through continuous auditing and continuous reporting to ensure all transactions meet certain compliance objectives, regulations, etc. I think my personal opinion is this is an area that is severely, where data analytics is severely under leveraged. And by that, when you receive so much federal financial assistance, you are required to undergo what they call a single audit. And the single audit says, we're going to look to see if you're actually in compliance with the federal program money that you received, the requirements for the federal program money. So you receive, funding, and it says, well, this is for job training for youth of a certain age and a certain income level. Okay, you could use data analytics, right, to do an analysis to make sure that there's no participants in the program that have a date of birth before this certain date and have listed family income of a certain amount, right? And you could do that whole analytic there, and you could commonly, the way that's tested when auditors come in and look at those compliance requirements, it's tested on a sample basis. And I keep asking folks that do these single audits, aren't you using data analytics to do 100% testing on that kind of thing? Because that's one of the beauties of data analytics is that you're able to look at every single one of the transactions. And I always get this sort of glassy-eyed, I could see them trying to figure out how to answer the question without, sounding like they haven't considered this. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, okay, you haven't done this at all, have you? And so, I think I'm predicting that one of you will create a software that does this kind of work. And so, you will then be able to market that software to CPA firms. And then you have to invite me to your mansion vacation home. Okay, you need to let me borrow your vacation home for 2 weeks out of each year. Okay, your Tahoe mansion or whatever. Okay, I say your Tahoe mansion because my neighbor, he was sitting there saying the other day, he's like, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. My vacation home, blah, blah, blah. And I started giving him a hard time. I was like, oh, poor guy, you got to take care of your vacation home. Turns out he's got a vacation home in Tahoe. So when I said that, I guess he kind of felt bad. He said, well, you can use it sometime. I was like, okay, that's one thing I might take you up on. So anyway, but that kind of thing I'm trying to give you encouragement that you might think about that. That's the kind of thing that can have some value. And I think it's an untapped area. I think it's highly under leveraged. Okay, taking the data analytics is for that purpose. Financial analytics, okay, and it obviously is going to allow us to organize transactions, monitor financial performance, right? Ratio analysis that can be done on a continuous basis, okay? Audit analytics, okay, so finally they get into the audit application of this stuff. And so analytics are key to audits, 4 types: assessing risk, right, providing assurance, establishing thresholds and expectations, and that's really what we do in our audit analytics, and improving the quality of testing by testing full populations. And this is sort of what I'm talking about in the arena of risk compliance. I was talking about it, but you could also do it in a financial statement audit. I want to look at every single one of the accounts receivable and do a and see what has been put into the allowance for every single one based on the aging of those receivables. And you can look to see if you have any exceptions where the amount that's put into the allowance for each individual receivable is not consistent with the company's policies to what they're supposed to put in the allowance for each category, right? And so you could actually do 100% testing, not on these broad categories, but on every single account receivable, and you can get that information that way. So, okay. And that's possible because of the increased computing power that you see now. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of class, tax analytics, okay? Government entities, organizations use tax analytics to organize tax information to see that they're in accordance with guidelines and whatnot. So IRS probably has certain data analytics that they do for, tripwires of amounts that are going to trigger, say, an audit or something like that. Okay. So again, guys, I know I highlighted and talked a lot there. Really, all I want you to do there is, flashcard the high-level headings, and if you need to, give yourself a couple little words to remember what some of those meant and move on from that. Okay. Okay. Good. Data visualizations. Okay, how are we going to present the data? This is a big deal because what happens? You're dealing with boards of directors, you're dealing with high-level managers. They're not going to read, 300 pages of, writing of what you have talked about, discovered with your data analytics. They want to see a picture. And even if you do write 300 pages, you're still going to want to include some visualizations in there. Okay, so you might think about some of the things that we're mentioning here when you do a project here at Golden Gate and they ask you to write up a paper. You want to blow away your instructor, think about the analysis you're doing and think about different ways to visualize that data, right? And include that in your paper write-up or whatever. Okay, so you come over and you take a look at qualitative data, and qualitative data is non-numerical, okay, obviously, okay, and it can be categorical in nature, okay, and so they say that qualitative data is either nominal or ordinal, and I have to be honest with you, I started looking at this and I'm like, what are they saying here? I'm not sure. Let's read it. Maybe you can explain it to me. But at the end of the day, just remember that qualitative data has the ability to be either nominal or ordinal. Sorry, guys. I mean, I just don't wake up in the morning using the terms nominal and ordinal. I don't know about you, but let's just take a look. Nominal data is in its simplest form and cannot be ordered or ranked. Ordinal data is categorical and not quantitative, but can be ranked in meaningful way, such as from cool to cold to warm to hot. Whatever. I mean, we're not going to, it's ridiculous. I mean, sometimes I feel like if I talked like this when I was growing up in Hayward, nominal versus ordinal, I would have gotten beaten up. Okay, so some of these terms don't mean a whole lot to sort of everyday conversation. So just flashcard some of those things. And as I say that, when I was reviewing this material earlier today, I don't know if you could see this, but I wrote next to this, oh brother. when I was looking at that earlier. So I don't know what the hell are they talking about. I forgot I had written that. Okay, so one time a potential Becker instructor asked, can I see your book to see how you mark up your book in preparation of the class? And I had to deny that because there are all kinds of things where I wrote, what on earth is this and stuff like that. And I didn't want them to see that. So anyway, come over and let's take a look at quantitative data. And I really think that this is more where, data analytics is going to be relevant. Okay. So we start looking at quantitative data. Okay. And let's take a look. Quantitative data is numerical in nature. So I want a flashcard on quantitative data, just at the high level. The data can be quantitative, but it's what? It's numbers, continuous values. Okay, just flashcard. The data can be quantitative. Okay, and then we start to get into the types of visualization. Okay, and guys, this is very, very, very simple stuff. Okay, so a line chart is best used when showing trends. I think we know that over time, right? Okay. Column charts are good for comparisons. You can flashcard that. Just a reminder of the types of analysis that would be visualized in these ways. Stacked bar columns are similar to column charts. However, each column is stratified to show additional details. What's missing here? Do you get anything meaningful out of this? What's missing?
There's nothing to compare.
Where's the legend? Okay, and we'll talk about legends a little bit later, but you absolutely need a legend. I don't know. So you're telling me here, what is this, dot racing, that the Blues are winning? I don't know what I'm supposed to be understanding here, right? Okay, so you would definitely need a legend. And I think the more complicated a visualization gets, the more obviously the need for a legend. And but another thing to keep in mind is sometimes these kind of, you got to be careful that the visualization just doesn't blow the, completely blow the user away, that they don't know what the heck's going on. Okay. And then we have scatter plots. Okay. And they explain relationships between two variables, usually the X and the Y. The X being the independent variable, the Y being the dependent variable. And that's really what regression analysis does to a large extent, but you can flashcard that. Okay. Okay, good. Coming over, you can have box plots. Okay. This thing is a box plot. Okay, flashcard, what they say about a box plot. Okay, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, and then you can have dot plots. Okay, they can be two-dimensional, I guess, whatever. I don't know. Flashcard this, guys. At some point, I'm getting bored with this. Okay, I mean, geographic maps are not a bad idea. I think geographic map. Symbol maps demonstrate the use of symbols, filled circles and stuff. So you got a geographic map, but then you can use symbol maps too. So that's really kind of both what they're pointing to there. I don't know that you need a flashcard on that. And then pie charts will show, how different pieces make up the 100%, whatever. Okay. Okay, nothing terribly earth-shattering here. In fact, I'm done with this. Okay, you can look at this on your own, guys. I'm a little bit bored by this conversation at this point because it's like, okay, no kidding. Okay, so look at some of these, and if you see a question that relates to one of these types of visualizations, go ahead and add a flashcard for that if you think you need to. But I think it has value too, just if you're asked to do a paper, you might want to, earmark these pages so that you can come back later and say, oh, okay, I think waterfall will be a cool way to visualize something that I'm talking about here. Okay. Okay, good. Let's take a look at considerations for design in these graphics. And yeah, we do want to flashcard these considerations. So is it scaled appropriately? Okay. Use legends. Okay. Now they're telling us to use legend. Meanwhile, they didn't have a legend on the example that they did. avoid bias, use consistent time periods. Okay, if you're comparing 12 months from last year, then it's got to be 12 months from this year, right? Use colors that can easily be followed, following cultural norms. I don't know what the hell that means. Use clear and easy to read titles and labels. Okay, and you'll be surprised as you prepare a report. At least I always felt at GAO, this was sometimes some of the more interesting conversations that we would have. We would have folks that their whole area was developing the visualizations. And at some point you'd sit down, I forget what they used to tell those guys, what they used to call those guys, but you would sit down and there would be, you know, a good hour meeting talking about, because usually the team would come up with, you know, an idea of how to visualize something. And then I forget what they would call them. I think maybe they called them reports analysts would come in and they would look, and their gift, their genius was they'd say, no, you really want to present the data this way, and this is going to be more meaningful. And so those are important considerations, and these are the type of things that they may talk about. Okay, I think that's enough of the visualization stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and let's take a look at a couple multiple choice questions now for our data analytics discussion. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and make our selections. I've got a couple folks not participating, so don't get me into that mode where I start calling out. Okay, so let's take a look at this one, and we have about 87% of us getting this right, so that's good. That's a good outcome. Okay, but let's just take a look. A couple folks maybe might need a little extra help with this one. Okay, so an organization has decided to analyze social media posting concerning the industry in which it operates. Resulting data include text, numbers, images, and videos. Which category of big data best describes this? Well, volume is the amount of data. They're not talking about the amount of data here. They're talking about the different types of data, videos, images. Velocity is the speed. There's nothing here that mentions speed. Veracity is the reliability of the data. I don't think anybody picked veracity. Variety, yeah, I mean, obviously, it's almost like, can you read this question? When we're talking about a variety of types of data, that is variety, right? Okay, question? Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's look at the next one. Okay, guys, looks like most of us have had a chance to take a look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, so make your best choice here. But when we look, again, a good outcome, 88% of us got it correct. So that's good. A couple of us thought maybe A was the correct answer. So let's just take a look at this question. If an organization decides to analyze sales by looking at the average sales by region, it would be implementing which type of data analytic process? And the correct answer was descriptive analysis. I think if they had used a different word, an organization decides to project sales by looking at the average sales, then it would be predictive, right? But because they're just saying they're analyzing it, they're not saying that they are trying to project or determine what the amount of sales will be in the next year or something. That would then be what predictive. Diagnostic would be saying they're trying to understand why sales move, and prescriptive would be saying, well, in the future, if we market more to this demographic, let's say, then our sales will jump by 20%. That would be more of a prescriptive analysis, right? Prescriptive, the doctor tells you, they prescribe a pill, take this pill and you'll feel better. Okay, so do this and that will happen, is more prescriptive analysis. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead then. Looks like we're moving along here, but let's take a break. I'm showing that it's about I'm just going to say 6:25. So we'll come back at 6:35. I'll give you a little over 10 minutes and generously give you 2 extra minutes. And we're going to pause the recording and I'll start it back up when we get back, okay? Resume the recording and let's take a look at module 5 here. And really, even though they've broken this back part into different modules, what we're going to really be looking at is this idea of change, okay? System change, system development, system change. and then management of that change. Okay, so what they're really saying to us here is that change, way to kind of frame this, okay, way to frame this in your mind, is that change, okay, and you experience this, I'm sure, in your own life, equals what? Equals risk. Okay, risk requires what? Requires management. Okay, and how do we manage risk? Maybe I should do it this way instead of, instead of saying they equal, that one causes the other, sort of a chain reaction. We have change, thus we have risk, thus we have to manage that risk, and we manage that risk through what? Through controls. Okay, so you're going to see that that's the theme here. They're going to talk about, well, you have to change, you have to develop something that's going to create risk. You have to, and sometimes they'll just use the word manage the risk, but they're really talking about what controls. And then sometimes they just come right out and talk to them about controls. Now, why do we have to change our systems to begin with, our IT systems to begin with? And they say evolving, and they could really put the word rapidly evolving infrastructure, IT infrastructure. And you take a look, and existing systems are no longer compatible with newer software, modern software. Advances in technology have resulted in more effective systems being available, or even though they don't get to it so much here, there could be vulnerabilities to old systems that need to be addressed. Thus, we will have to make some changes. Okay, so we come down and we start out with this overview, but you can see that regardless of the scope or size of the change management, potential risks need to be mitigated, okay, need to be managed, need to be controlled. And so we're going to have to manage that change, okay? So they give us a management change process, okay? And we literally have steps that we can take a look at. First, identify the need for the change. Why are we having to change our IT system? Design a high-level plan. How are we going to achieve our goals, etc.? Obtain approval from management for the change, obviously, but we're not going to start, hey, guess what, man? We just revamped the whole IT system. You're going to love it. Obviously, you need that approval, but more than the approval, you also need the sponsorship, okay? Because we're going to see that one of the risks is going to be resistance to the change. And so you need sponsorship from high levels of the organization. Develop an appropriate budget and timeline. Assign responsible personnel for managing the change. Identify and address potential risk with the change. And then what? Provide an implementation roadmap, procedures, how we're going to train personnel, test the change, execute the implementation, and then monitor that change. Okay, so we've gone through and we've seen what the steps are. And again, the mantra is going to be here, what? Risks. How do you manage those risks? How do you control those risks? What are controls that you can have over those risks? Okay, so let's go ahead, because you know that the CPA exam loves what? Risk versus benefit questions, risks versus what? Controls, right? So let's go ahead and make sure that we flashcard risk, we flashcard the types of controls that would be associated with these risks. I know it's a lot of flashcards, a lot of things to remember. So keep in your mind the mantra that we're talking about, what? Talking about change equals risks equals what? The need to manage that risk through controls, right? And that's really what we're going. So let's just start to flashcard those. And there's pretty obvious types of risk, okay? Lack of expertise. We're making a change to the IT system, but we don't have the expertise to be able to handle those changes, right? Lack of formal selection and acquisition process. Before we acquire something, we need the proper approvals. We need to make sure that the acquisition is going to meet the needs. And then software, hardware, and vulnerability and incompatibility. And the vulnerability issue is really the one to me that is the hardest, because that vulnerability can attack from anywhere. And so, and the hackers and whatnot are constantly sitting there figuring out new ways to, get into our information and mess our systems up and that and whatnot. So that's a pretty, dynamic aspect of risk. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the integration risk. Okay. And integration risk, how will we actually integrate this software into our business operations? User resistance, lack of management support. That's why I was saying when we were up here saying that one of the steps in the process is obtaining management approval, but it's more support from high levels of management for the change that we are making. So flashcard that. Okay, just coming over. High level flashcards here, guys. Okay, staying flashcard, continuing on to the next page here. Okay, so lack of stakeholder support. Again, those that are affected by the change don't really care to help to make it successful, right? Resource concerns, business disruption. Hey, we're switching over our system. Are we going to have a crash in our system? Or we're not going to be able to provide service to our customer? And lack of system integration. The change that we're making may not fit into our legacy systems. So legacy systems are original systems. And we'll talk more about some risk associated with legacy systems in a little while. Okay, but let's just take a look. Continuing our risk. Okay, and let's do this. I'm going to put blue, and I'm really asking for 2 flashcards here. So one flashcard, okay, will give us the 3 types of risk. So 3 types of risk. Let's see. Let me do a better job than that. That's not looking good. Come on. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so 3 types of IT change risk. And the 3 types are what? 1, acquisition risk. 2, integration risk. And 3, we'll get to the details here in a second, outsourcing risk. Those are the risks, okay? And then I want the flashcards that, describe the categories, if you will, of acquisition risk, integration risk, and then coming down, the one we haven't gone through the details yet, outsourcing risk, okay? So outsourcing risk, there's the lack of organizational knowledge, okay? Could leave the organization vulnerable because we're maybe trusting or over trusting a third party. Uncertainty of the third party's knowledge and management. Okay, hey, who knows? Sometimes they may be overseas and it may be difficult to determine that they have the sufficient knowledge and they're keeping up with changes, right? And then lack of security can lead to transmission of sensitive data, confidential data, to someone that we're outsourcing our work to, and so that could be problematic. Okay, all right, so flashcard, the 3 types of risks here, and then the details under the 3 types. Okay, and as I've said, it goes from what? It goes from risks to controls. Okay, so change management controls here, okay, include the following. So let's flashcard at a high level some of these. Okay, so we have what? Policies and procedures, change management guidelines, emergency change policies. Okay, because changes arise when a crisis or time sensitive threat requires a quick response. such an operating system patch exposes the company to severe security threats. So all of a sudden you have some sort of patch, and that patch sometimes, and I think they've talked about this, I've heard them talk about it, you know, with some of the Russian hacking that went on, they exposed a weakness in the patch, and that was how they got in to, you know, create these different problems. And so we are really right now in an emergency change policy mode, right? I mean, that's, you know, something that the president and, you know, the administration keeps talking about. And I think they are very worried about that aspect of how, you know, Russia might respond to some of the sanctions and stuff that are being put on them is through some of these, you know, service interruptions, that kind of thing. Okay. Standardized change request. Okay. Standardized using forms, et cetera, protocols. Impact assessment. Okay. So there needs to be documentation on the effect the change will have on the organization's business. There needs to be the appropriate authorization. Separation of duties. And let's go ahead and let's take a look at a couple of the things that fall under separation of duty. For example, distinguishing team members who develop and design specific components from employees responsible for placing those components into production. And I would also put down here, and assessing impact and we'll talk about monitoring in a second. The monitoring after we put the change in place, that says monitoring. This is monitoring. After putting the change in place, think about it. If you're responsible for rolling out the change, okay, do you also want that individual to be responsible for what? Assessing the impact and monitoring the impact? Probably not, right? Because they're going to be the person that says, oh, everything's going great. Meanwhile, things are kind of collapsing, right? So you probably want to control there. Conversion controls, okay? How will we convert from the legacy old system to the new ones? And then reversion policy. If there's a problem and we can't get the new system to work, how will we revert to the old system? There'll be pre-implementation testing, okay, before we actually implement, right? That's before. And then post-implementation after, and then ongoing continuous monitoring, okay? And that's basically to say that how are things being processed now is the post-implementation, and then this may be commence a shorter interval, weekly, et cetera, as you move on, and you know, lesser intervals over time for the monitoring. Okay. All right. Anyway, flashcard. And again, we got risks of the change. We've got controls, ways to manage those risks. Okay. Okay, good. Now we come over, and of course, we could have, I thought I went over outsourcing controls. Oh, no, I didn't. I went over outsourcing risk. Let's look at outsourcing controls, okay? Because we said there's two types of risk. One is the implementation risk. The other is the outsourcing risk. So we talked about selection and integration risk, which those set of controls that we just went over would mitigate those types of risk. And then for the outsourcing risk, which is our third category of risk, you take a look, and we would have outsourcing policy and procedures. So let's just flashcard these as outsourcing risk. System and organizational control reports, guys, which we talked about, I think, last time, okay? And what you could do is you could have a third party, say a CPA firm, come in and look at the entity that you're going to be outsourcing work to. And I think we use the example paychecks, and see that they have the proper controls that'll mitigate some of those outsourcing risks that we had talked about earlier. And then you could utilize key performance indicators, and they tell us organizations establish agree on a key performance indicators set clear expectations for the vendor and allow the outsourcing company to monitor the performance over time. I don't remember if I gave the example in this class, but I was actually put on an assignment one time where Congress wanted to make sure that entities that process federal tax receipts. Okay, so what IRS does is they contract with commercial banks to process all the tax payments. Okay, and they do this process where they scan the checks that are sent in, and that updates the government's bank accounts, and that's how the money gets into the treasury when somebody owes on their tax. Well, there was a problem because the IRS has one of these key performance indicator agreements with these banks, and they have to process so many returns within a period of time. I don't know if it's, I forget if it's daily or weekly or whatever it is. Well, what happened was, in order to keep up with this key performance indicator, some of the banks, I don't know if it was one or two, got into this thing of just shredding the tax returns. Rather than processing them to keep up with their key performance indicators, they just shred the returns so it wouldn't look like as many were coming in, so they wouldn't be held accountable for not keeping up with the quota of what they were supposed to produce. Well, Congress doesn't think it's too funny when a check that's headed for the federal treasury gets shredded on the way, so they asked GAO to look into what were some of the problems with the IRS's processes of overseeing some of the key performance indicators, or overseeing these outsourcing of this service that was being done. More is what they were more interested in. And what was funny about that is there's a IRS processing center in Hayward. And what happened was, because this Hayward sample came up, they asked me to go and look at the Hayward one, or be involved in the looking at the Hayward one, since everyone knew I was from Hayward. You know, we didn't find too many problems there. The only problem we found with the Hayward one and the bank that was doing the work at the Hayward facility is that they had their main and their backup on the same power grid. So their main was in Hayward and their backup was in San Francisco or something. I'm like, you can't have that, guys. One event takes out the main and the backup. And so they moved the backup to Texas so that it would be on a different power grid, which probably was something IRS should have been aware of and monitoring. In fact, now that I think about it, we should have made a big deal. See, here we go with the audit flashbacks. We should have made a big deal out of that, because they actually weren't doing a good job of what? Of managing the outsourcing risk of making sure that they're the appropriate backups and that kind of stuff. So for that particular outsourcing that was being done by the federal government. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and take a look at managing risk now of system development. Okay, so now we're into the system development, and we're into the system development life cycle. So this is a little different than just sitting there and, you know, having a system that you're making changes to. This is sort of more from the ground up as you go through the different steps. And you can see here that we will have a plan. We'll analyze, design, develop, test, and deploy, and then maintain. Okay, now notice that we have this little graphic down here, which kind of shows this more as a cycle, as a circle, as a waterfall. Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and make a flashcard that really kind of, maybe you could almost copy this right out of your textbook and make a flashcard out of this, because it's got the nice graphic of the steps. And then it talks about what we need to do following are some challenges associated with the waterfall model. So you could put on the front side of the card, maybe what are the steps are these, and what are some of the challenges, right? And challenges is equal to what? Risks, okay? It requires a great deal of time to complete, benefits of the new system are not realized until complete, there is no customer input, and some employees may be idle before beginning after completing their steps. So I don't know that these challenges are risk related, it's challenges to this model. I should probably correct myself there. They're not so much risks as they are challenges to this model. Okay, so you could say, here's the model, what are some challenges? And make a flashcard out of this. Okay, good. Now you come over and let's take a look at some of the steps here. And we will, in our planning, right, we're going to plan. And one of the things that we look at in planning, coming over the next page, okay, because we don't need to go through every single one of these things, is the design. Okay, let's look at design of our system. And the design phase, they tell us, can be subdivided into 3 parts. Okay, so let's flashcard that. I could see somebody asking a detail here about what is the design, what is contemplated in the design phase. So you could have conceptual design, which is a broad translation of business requirements into technical requirements. Logical design, hardware and software specifications. Physical design is more granular platform and production specifications. So you just flashcard the types of design considerations. Okay, good. Come over. Another step is deploy. Okay, and let's go ahead and make a flashcard. We already have the flashcard of the steps. I don't think we need to say something about every single one of the steps, but these where they start giving us some terminology around the step, I think is worth a flashcard. So let's take a look, and we could use the plunge or big bang. Essentially, you turn one system off and you start the next one, right? Ramped portions of the new system replace corresponding parts of the old system. So you do it in stages, right? A/B testing, a subset of user gets the new system while the old system is still used and assigned to current and new customers. It's interesting. At Golden Gate, they were thinking of changing over from your system, your e-learning system is what they call a Moodle-based system, and they were talking about getting rid of that and moving over to Canvas. And certain individuals and certain schools within Golden Gate were allowed to kind of mess around with Canvas for a while. And they, in my opinion, because I deal with both Canvas and Moodle-based systems in the different universities I teach, I was hoping that they wouldn't switch over to Canvas here at Golden Gate, because I think Moodle is a much more robust system. But they did do some of that where they were kind of saying, oh, okay, let's see how this works for some of the other folks, and then we'll kind of slowly bring in others. But they never pulled the trigger on that, and I think that was a good thing. And then you could have blue, green. The new system is fully developed in parallel with the old system, and then we will progressively duplicate traffic to the new system. And then once the new system is handling all the old traffic, once the new system is handling all the traffic, the old system could be turned off. Okay. All right, good. Now let's go ahead. We talked about some of the steps in deploying. And of course, then we're going to, in development, I should say, and now we're going to look at what? System development, risks, and then you probably will not be surprised. We'll look at what? We'll look at some controls around that, okay? So let's just take a look at when going through the system development cycle. An organization will face many risks. These risks can be paramount, and we're going to outline what some of those risks are below. And so let's just go ahead and flashcard at a high level. Resource risk, obviously, this can be very costly, right? Scheduling risk, okay? We're going to have something that's going to affect our ability to, achieve other goals and objectives of the organization because of the time that's being taken to undertake this development of this new software or whatever, this new system, I should say. Technical risk, Okay, project management risk, user resistant risk. And if you're saying, well, John, we already talked about some of these, there are similar categories of risk between what? Between changing an existing system or just basically building a new system from the ground up. So when you go and you take a look at managing these risks, and we start talking about these risks, okay, and we first talked about managing risk of a legacy system. So what this is saying is, rather than create a new system, just keep the old one. We've seen enough. Okay, we're not going to do anything else. Well, there's certain risks associated with a legacy system. There's risk associated with doing nothing. Okay, so outdated technology already in service, okay, are sometimes referred to as a legacy system. Okay. Now, reasons for persistence of a legacy system: the cost to purchase or develop a new system, time in implementing the new system. So entities go ahead and they want to maintain a legacy system because they're afraid of things like user resistance, cost, time, features, and customization. The existing system may have certain customizations that you're maybe going to have trouble duplicating in a new system. You're worried that you might lose some information. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look now. I know we have talked about the reasons for maintaining that. Now let's get more into what we're going to flashcard here, which is the risks of keeping a legacy system. And let's go ahead and flashcard these risks. And you have security vulnerability. Okay, hackers and other cyber criminals have become more advanced and educated as they share flaws and openings are discovered in our systems. And again, the rate at which they're being able to do this now is just, you know, it's alarming. Okay, then you take a look, legacy systems may have less sophisticated security. Organizations may be slow to install patches, or new patches may not be available for legacy systems. And legacy systems are sometimes paired with new systems, and that leaves openings. And again, that's what I think I had heard with some of the Russian hacks that were done. The way they got in was they exposed some weaknesses in older systems and got in, or they exploited some weaknesses in patches, and that was how they got in. So those are a couple of areas that can be a little bit vulnerable. Okay, lack of vendor support. Okay, and when you do the flashcard, guys, I guess you can do the high level flashcard. Okay, but then also I'm asking for a flashcard for these security vulnerability, because I think that's sort of a hot button topic right now. And so I'm thinking maybe the examiners are going to ask you to, you know, comment on some of those, maybe in a written communication or something. So I want you to make a second flashcard for security vulnerability, and then a big flashcard for the overall risk that we're talking about here. So there'll be this big risk flashcard: security vulnerability, lack of vendor support, compatibility issues. Okay, many legacy systems are incompatible with modern systems, right? And lack of efficiency and effectiveness. You know, there may be a situation where you're just dealing with stuff that the technology that the world has passed it by. And you know, have that risk if you maintain a legacy system. So we have risks, and we have what? We have management, we have mitigation of the risk. So again, we have the risk, we have the controls. So let's take a look at some controls, some ways of mitigating the risk of a legacy system. Isolating the system, so only certain transactions will be exercised through that. Trying to harden the system. Okay, so turn off unnecessary features to the legacy system to reduce potential exposure. You can have virtual patches. Okay, and you can also have monitoring, more frequent monitoring. Okay, so I think you're seeing the pattern here, right? Risks, different controls, ways of managing, mitigating, whatever word they use. those risks. Okay. All right, good. Coming over information system and change management strategies. Okay. And the key thing we're going to be looking at here is ways of testing. Okay. Testing what we're doing. So establishing an ongoing testing plan for information technology is necessary to discover any problems or functional issues. So we're going to talk about the key phrase there is testing. And this is really part of controls, right? If you think about it, we're now still in the control land, and that we're sitting here saying, well, okay, we've got these concerns, these risks. We're putting some controls in place, and testing is a form of a control, right? To see that if there's problems, we're able to address them. Okay, so you come over to types of tests. Okay, and let's just look at the types of tests, and then we're going to get a little bit of understanding of what these are. But first, make me a high-level flashcard, okay, that gives us the type of test: unit testing, integration testing, system testing. Okay, and then let's go ahead and take a look at some of the more detail under each one of these. Unit tests are used to evaluate the smallest component of the system. Okay, the goal of unit testing is to isolate each part of the program and show that individual parts are functioning properly as designed. Flashcard that. Integration test. Integration test is determining if the units, once they are combined, function as designed together. Flashcard that. You know, these are pretty simple definitions, guys, but I'm asking you to flashcard them just because, again, we've got a ton of terminology here, right? Best way to get around this is the flashcards. Okay. Now, when we look at system tests, okay, let's look at system tests, and there are two types of system tests. And so we can go ahead and flashcard what are the two types, and then probably provide some context from some of the information that's given. But functional tests take realistic business scenarios and run them through the system to validate they are effectively and efficiently working. Black box testing, okay, and no or little information about how the product is designed is given. Rather, the focus on the design testers focus on testing the system in a manner that an end user would and validate the outcome. So we're saying if somebody came in with very little knowledge about this system, would they be able to navigate their way through it? I guess we're seeing how intuitive is the ability of somebody to use this system. Now, you could have white box testing, okay? And with white box testing, and guys, this is one big flashcard of the different types of tests. We will now provide the user with many details and is focused on code and design improvement to opposed to testing functionality. So we let them know about the system and ask them to work with it and see if they're able to navigate their way through. Exploratory testing. We're going to basically utilize the less common or exception-based situations with no specific test cases. Performance testing is designed to test the run time speed, performance of the software. Recovery testing, if the system fails, how will we be able to recover? Security testing, can we penetrate the system? Is there the proper penetration controls? Regression tests, rerun previous test cases within the entire application. Stress testing, this is a big one. I think this was probably the big mistake they made when they rolled out the Affordable Care Act a few years back. The system crashed right away because they just, I don't know what happened. I don't know how, with all the controversy that was around the Affordable Care Act, that they didn't do an incredible amount of stress testing under different scenarios. What happened was they just didn't expect the volume of transactions that came through in the very beginning, and the systems crashed, which was ridiculous. I mean, there was no reason for that to have happened They should have done the appropriate stress testing, and that would have avoided that problem. And then sanity test, the logical reasoning behavior of the software to determine whether system logic is functioning as designed. Okay. Okay, good. So that gives us our different our different system tests. We have integration tests, we have system tests, and now our last category of tests, the application testing. Okay, so let's just go ahead. Well, they have acceptance. They're calling that not application, but acceptance testing. I don't know why they called it application testing up there and acceptance testing here. Doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, so let's just consider this as acceptance testing. That doesn't actually add up. I don't know why they called it application testing here and acceptance testing here, but why don't we just do it this way? In both cases, call it, we'll do a slash. So I'd say in both cases, call it, because I think they mean the same thing, application acceptance. Sounds like the different stages of grief, application, acceptance, anger, whatever. Okay, but we have the acceptance phase here. Okay, and so let's just call that acceptance / application down here. Okay, and you can have alpha test versus beta test. Okay, I'm trying to highlight that, not strike it. Alpha test versus beta test. And so let's just go ahead and flashcard the two types of acceptance / application testing. And we have the initial version of completed software tested by customer under the supervision of the system developer. The beta obviously comes later, and now we are dealing without the developer being present. So one is with, alpha is with the developer present or at their site, and one is without. Okay. Okay, good. I think that's enough. Okay, I think we've already talked about change management. We've talked about testing, and I don't see that there's any kind of new information about testing that's provided there than what we've already talked about. So let's just come over and let's take a look at a couple multiple choice questions. Okay, guys, we've had a chance to take a look at this one. I'm going to end the poll. Looks like most folks have had a chance to answer. And you take a look, and yeah, good response, 94%. Okay, there's a couple of different responses here. Someone wants D, but let's just go ahead and take a look. But most of us got it correct. The item A is the correct answer. So retailer recently purchased a point of sale system to replace its legacy system for transaction processing and evaluating different approaches to integrate the new software. Alex decided to take a parallel implementation approach, meaning that they're going to do what? They're going to keep the legacy system while they're getting the new system up and running. This is going to be what? They say they're going to do this in case it wants to switch back to the legacy system. That's almost right there telling we're talking about what? Reversion access back to the old system, right? Standardized change requests, are going to be a way of managing the change, but that has nothing to do with running a parallel. Okay, all of these are change management controls. But for this particular description, they're talking about reversion access. Okay, good. Let's take a look at the next question now, which is getting us into some tests. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and let's look at this one. We've got one person didn't respond yet, but that's, I want to go ahead and end this and see how we did. Okay, we did pretty good on this one, 75%. We have a little bit of scattering of some of the other choices, but I think what you really want to do to help along with some of these sort of definitional things is note that the question, as it sort of struggles to give you a question without making the answer just so obvious, they kind of end up missing that objective. Because once they say the logical reasoning of a system, that phrase, logical reasoning, is to me, logical reasoning is consistent with sanity, isn't it? I mean, if someone's insane, you say you're illogical, you're irrational, you're not thinking right? So logical reasoning deals with sanity. These others have obviously different objectives and different definitions. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go ahead then and let's take a look at module 6. And I apologize for the long chapters. I really don't think it's right for them to give us a 100-page chapter. So I don't know, maybe we'll finish this tonight. I'm not entirely sure. If we don't, which reminds me, if we don't finish this tonight, what we'll do on next Tuesday is we'll finish this, obviously, and then we'll get into the final review. Is there any question on what the final review book is all about? Everyone knows that's that thinner book that I showed you last time.
No, sorry, I missed that.
Okay. So what you need to do is make sure that for next time, get up to my bookcase here, but for next time, you want to make sure and get this book. It looks just like the BEC book on the cover. I mean, it's blue or whatever, aqua, whatever color this is. We call this teal, whatever. Okay, and then it's much thinner, and we're going to start on this next time. If we don't, we're going to start on this next time. We don't finish this chapter tonight. We'll finish this chapter and then we'll start in on this. Question?
Yes, sorry. Is the electronic version on the Becker website? Because I live out of the country. I didn't get the books shipped to me.
I don't think the electronic version, I don't know. I'm not sure if the electronic version is sitting there or not, but it may be worthwhile to look to see what is there. Has anyone discovered that? The only problem is it's going to require me to take my computer out of tablet mode. No, maybe not. Let's see.
Yes, it is. It is available on the website on our
Where is it?
Becker account. Yes.
Where?
So let's see. I was on home and it defaults to the business exam because that's what I'm taking now. And then under additional study tools, it says live, online, final review, unlimited practice.
Yes, it's right there.
Yes.
Okay.
So no need for the paper book if you didn't.
Where is it? I don't see it though.
It's so I think this is it. I think this is the final review. So
Where's the other chapters?
oh, there's only B1 and B2.
Oh, no, here it is, like this.
Oh,
No,
wait.
here. You got to click that arrow over.
Yeah, that's a little unintuitive, but yes, you're right. I see that too.
But these are the questions. Where's the book?
Here.
Well, is
Lecture.
the lecture MCQ simulations, each section has lecture MCQ simulations as it's modeled after the book, I imagine. I'm guessing the lecture is someone talking to you and side by side with the
Where's the book?
That's what I thought I was trying to say was that, so if you click on lecture, you probably bring up the annoying guy talking to you side by side with the actual text each
How
chapter.
do you plan to mark that up while I'm talking to you?
Oh, well, I've done, I think might not be the only one where I don't actually use a paper book at all. I mean, I've passed 2 of the exam sections already and not ever used a paper book. And I accepted that when I decided not to have the stuff shipped to me. So you can rely on Becker's markups if you want, or I usually just forego Mario markups entirely, which is what I do. But this is everything, it looks like. If
Not everything, it's not the book. Somebody show me where the book
okay,
is.
so click on lecture, click on the thing that says lecture.
That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm not sitting here for my health highlighting and indicating flashcards and stuff. I'm assuming that as I'm going through this, you guys are highlighting along with me and indicating what I've asked you to flashcard, so that after the fact, you can sit there and go back and make the flashcards that I'm asking, or at least see if the flashcard is available for you in the pre-purchased set of Becker flashcards. Make those flashcards, memorize those cards, and then apply them to the multiple choice questions. Are you telling me you're not doing that?
No, but like I've said, everyone learns in different ways, and I have already passed 2 of the sections, so it seems like it's
So
okay.
basically you're saying, hey, John, screw your methods, right?
Of course not. Of
I'm
course
not
not.
sure what you're saying. But okay.
Of course not. It seems like
Okay.
you seem a little bit defensive, but everyone has a different learning style.
I'm
And
not defensive. I am, I have a job, and my job is to help you get ready for the exam.
Yes, and I appreciate that.
I don't consider that defensive. I consider that a believer in what I'm trying to accomplish here. To
Yes,
you,
and
you think
the
it's
goal,
defensive. I don't think it's defensive. I think it's a person that has had 30 years of success in helping folks getting through an exam, expecting that they will follow that advice.
well, I think there's different means to the same end. So, I mean, I got a 97 on FAR by not taking any notes at all. I listened to the annoying videos and I did the MCQs over and over and over again. And I got a 97 on FAR. So like I said, everyone learns in a different way.
Okay, well, I would advise that you not take the class from Golden Gate then, because what's happening is you're really not doing the program that I'm talking about. So what are we doing? I'm not.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you lecture.
Okay. Anyway, so this is the book that if you're following the method that I outlined in the how to study file that I guess I'm putting up for no apparent reason, if you're following that approach, this would be the book, because we'll go through and we'll do the same kind of thing that we've been doing for the main course, which is highlighting, making flashcards and whatnot as we go along, okay? If you're not gonna do that, I don't know, I guess you can tune in to hear something that I might say that might be of use to you. Okay, so let's just go back.
That book is not on the Becker website.
Well, what book is on the Becker website? Let me ask that question. Is there somewhere where they give you the entire book on the website? Am I missing something?
No. I'm away and I forgot that book. So I was hoping that the answer was it was on the website.
So
Oh,
Matthew,
I see. You're confirming that it's not. Yeah,
Correct.
they're not going to put a PDF of the book up anywhere, because they're under the belief that they ship you a book, that's your book, and you should use that book. And that's why I'm holding this up, because my assumption at this point was that however many weeks ago that we started this class, I showed you how to redeem the book, and I mentioned that redeeming both of these books, and all I was trying to do here, which is turning out to be somewhat of a time-consuming thing, but all I was trying to say is, remember, you have this, because it should have came in.
all the other books, they do give you the electronic version, so.
There.
If you click on a module at the top of the module, it says annotated book.
Where's that?
Pre-annotated book.
Where?
That's right there below the.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a little different then. Okay.
I think what you were clicking on where it said final review, I think that is the person who spoke up. I think it was Matthew who said that it's not on there. Matthew, did you see where it says final review under additional study tools?
But it's not this, I think, is what he's saying. It's not this thing.
Okay, I can't validate that because I don't have the book, but.
Well, we're on the website and it's not there. We just looked at it. We just looked at the additional study tools, okay, the home page. We looked at the additional study tools. We
The
looked
final,
at final
final
review.
review. And
And
then what
all
I'm
you-
thinking is in each of the sections where if you click on lecture, the text is accompanies each of the lectures. That,
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start this.
yeah,
And there's the book, and there's the guy talking. And
Yeah,
how do you
exactly.
plan to parlay this into something that's studyable after you watch the video?
so I thought I said that people learn in different ways, and I got a 97 on FAR with never using a real textbook. So
Okay.
only electronic.
I
Some people can-
strongly disagree that that's the way to do it. Anyway, if you want to have that mess in front of you, and I guess you can annotate we're not talking about, I'm just talking about for the modules now, which is kind of late in the process to talk about that. You know, if you want this mess, okay, go ahead. You know, I find that a little hard to follow. But if you know, my approach is, and maybe this is worthwhile for if you're going to take FAR or something with me this summer, my approach is for you to get this book and follow along where I'm calling out flashcards and whatnot to use the material. And then again, you know, I would strongly consider saving yourself some tuition fees if you're gonna kind of end at the end of the day say, well, John, you know, I'm not doing anything that you're telling me to do. I'm gonna do something entirely different. Then it kind of like, well, take another class then. Okay, so with all that, let's go ahead and go back to where we were. And my main point there was, you know, you should probably have that small book. And I don't know, Jason, how you plan to get it in time now, but if you can possibly get it somehow by next week, it'll be good. Okay, so let's go. And that was kind of my point, that maybe you're somewhere else. You can tell somebody, hey, can you send it to me? Or where was that? That was my point in getting into all that. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this next one here, which is IT risks and responses. So again, we're into risk. We're into managing those risks by responding. We respond with controls, right? So you're saying, well, John, we've already talked about this in the context of, but we're talked about in the context of the system development, system acquisition, you know, making changes, you know, keeping a legacy system if we don't make the changes. What we're talking about here is now we have a system in place, but we want to keep that system secure. Okay, so we basically are going to go through a security process, which is identify the risk, okay, assess the risk, and then we're going to do what? We're going to mitigate that risk through controls, and then we're going to monitor to see that we are achieving the objectives of the control. So you take a look and we start to talk about identifying the risk, and there are different types of risk. There is technology risk, the risk of disruption because information activity is known as the technology risk. Security risk is the risk that associated unauthorized access to our information will come in because of the information technology. Again, the risk that there'll be hackers and that sort of thing, right? Availability risk. Let's take a look at that. This risk includes the inability to utilize hardware, software, and recover data in a timely manner as a result of some sort of system failure. You know, I'm thinking now, even though I didn't ask you for a flashcard on this at the beginning, go ahead and let's take a look at the different types of risk, and let's flashcard them at a high level. Technology risk, security risk, availability risk, okay? Operational risk is the risk that the entity will not be able to operate effectively or efficiently due to the information technology. We have some sort of problem, disruption, now we can't operate. That's our operational risk. Right here, Okay, financial risk coming down is this financial risk. We're going to find my right financial risk here. This could include employees using a company printer for personal use, purchasing and implementing software application that is never, or implementing a software application that is never used by employees. Compliance risk is focused on the issue related to information technology, not sufficiently meeting requirements of regulatory bodies. And strategic risk is not aligning our IT with our business strategies. Okay, very self-explanatory, the nature of these risks. Now here they start to get into types of threats, and threats and risk to me are synonymous. Okay, but let's just go ahead and make a separate flashcard that talks about the various types of threats. So you could have natural and political disasters. I think we're getting a good dose of that on a daily basis, right? Errors in software equipment malfunctions, accidental actions. I can't remember if I had mentioned in here, I was on an assignment looking at corporate credit unions, and they had a problem at one of them that the staff ran their maintenance and their backup simultaneously, and you're not supposed to do that. First you back up, then you do your maintenance. They tried to run those two simultaneously. They crashed the whole system, and they were down for like 2 or 3 days after that. And we had severe implications because corporate credit unions serve as a clearinghouse for several smaller credit unions. And so when the transactions that were supposed to be processed through this clearinghouse got stopped, then certain payroll distributions and whatnot didn't go out. And some folks, rely on a daily, weekly or bi-weekly paycheck to pay their bills. They live paycheck to paycheck. So people started missing house payments and everything else. So you could have an accidental, or you could have an intentional act, some sort of sabotage of the system, and that could, obviously create some problems. So flashcard, the types of IT threats. Okay, good. And when we talk about natural political disasters, fire, floods, terrorist attacks, right? I think we're, getting a lot of those. And so when you take a look at this flashcard, and I call this the 2020 flashcard, although it's looking like it could also be called the 2022 flashcard, in which everything happened. Okay, we had disasters from, fires. We had attacks, political uprisings, war. Okay, so this is the kind of stuff that unfortunately we have to deal with every day, right? And so why don't you go ahead and flashcard this table, because it calls out the different types of threats. And I think it's a good potential essay question, maybe, where they're going to sit there and expect you to describe the different types of threats. Okay, good. So you come over and you take a look at the way to manage these risks. And notice, guys, here, because you're saying, John, we've talked about, risks, and we've talked about managing those risks through controls. Why are we doing this again? Again, here now we're talking about what? We have a system in place, but this stuff keeps coming at us, doesn't it? It's not a new system now that's creating these risks. It's, things that keep coming at us because of, just ongoing life, right? Okay, so we have to basically integrate the overall company risk management, which we've talked about in other chapters, to IT, make well-informed decisions, and develop an appropriate response. Okay, now, they start to get into quite a bit of, additional descriptions of the different things that we've talked about already: confidentiality, integrity, all of these different things. So I want to just move into categories of IT controls, because they sort of keep going on and on about the different types of risk now as they relate to an existing system. But we've already talked about those categories of risk as it relates to a new system. So I don't see a lot of value added to going back through that. But now let's take a look at categories of IT controls for more a system that is ongoing. So we have two broad categories here, maybe four categories, but the two broad categories really are general controls and application controls. Okay, now general controls are basically overall controls for our IT system. Okay, and we're looking at some of these such as physical and logical controls. So what happens? Remember I talked about moving the backup to a different power grid, okay? Not having your main and your backup in the same building. I think I gave the example before about when we were on the audit of the Bureau of Public Debt. They had their backup and their main in the same building, and the Ohio River ran right behind there. Okay, well, you can't have that. One flood of the breach of the Ohio River going to flood the main and the backup. Okay, system development life cycle. Okay, controls. All of these different things. Acquisition of software. They don't mention it here, but what? Passwords. Passwords that allow you into the system to begin with are an example of a general control. Okay. Now we also have application controls, but application controls are at a lower level. They're built into business processes and use computer applications. So what happens? Payroll might have application controls. So for our payroll, we don't want everybody to get into the payroll application where everyone can see everyone else's pay rates and whatnot, right? We only want individuals that absolutely have a necessity to see that data to be able to get in. We may put some sort of limit on the amount of any one payroll check. No payroll check should exceed, and we'll pick the top paid person individual, and no paycheck should exceed that amount. Okay, so those are examples of what we try to do with application controls. They're at a lower level, such as payroll. Now, which one do you think is more important? Which one do you think affects the other more? Do you think that the general controls affect the application controls, or the application controls affect the general controls?
General control is more important.
Yeah, often what will happen is an entity will say, you'll see, well, the application controls are okay, but you have some general control problems. I mean, who cares if we have a control over payroll if we're vulnerable to disaster recovery in our overall system, right? And so, yeah, the general controls are typically the more important, Serena, than the application controls. Okay, but they're both important, but the general control, the application controls rely on the general controls. Now we can also look at the nature of these controls, and you can have manual controls, which are obviously performed by a person without making direct use of automated systems. But you can also have automated controls. Automated controls are embedded within the IT infrastructure. Okay. Now you come over and you take a look at IT dependent manual controls, and you know, some of these definitions, guys, are like, okay, the definition is what the thing is called, because it tells you that it's what, combining both the manual controls and IT controls. Okay, so let's come over and look at the types of functional controls. Okay, and you have preventative controls, you have detective controls, and you have corrective controls. So make a flashcard at a high level that calls out the different types of functional controls. Okay, so preventive controls, obviously, as the term indicates here, I want you to make a high level flashcard of the three types of functional controls. Preventive controls prevent problems from ever happening. Okay. For an accountant, the classic example of a preventive control is if you're dealing with a general ledger software, you put in a debit for $100, you have to put a credit in for $100, or the system will not accept that journal entry, right? Because debits have to equal credits. That's an excellent example of a preventative control, okay? But physical access controls, locks, guards are all things that are preventative, right? Firewalls, antivirus software are all examples of preventive controls. Don't let the bad thing happen, okay? Detective controls are going to find a problem, okay, such as surveillance cameras, bank or account reconciliations, right? Corrective controls now, and let's go ahead and flashcard some of the corrective controls because that's something that's a little bit different, okay? So examples of corrective controls: applying operating system upgrades, maintaining data and system backup, fixing data entry or transaction errors, okay? And so you can just go ahead and flashcard some of the examples of corrective controls. Coming over, okay, system access and segregation of duties, and you can have logical access controls. Logical access controls utilize software and protocol to monitor and control access information and an organization's IT structure. User access controls is an example of a logical access controls. And we basically need to be able to track the identity of any unique user. So if somebody does something wrong, we can trace it back to the particular individual that violated whatever access they should have. Okay. Authentication, easy for me to say, controls, and let's go ahead and flashcard some of that. Okay, so password controls, okay, PIN numbers, biometrics such as fingerprints, voice recognition, physical token, push notifications. Anytime I log into some of my school accounts, I have to do a dual. They have to send me a push notification and I approve that, and then I'm able to access the system. Multi-factor, we will use more than one form. So not only will they require you to get some sort of push notification, but you'll also have to enter some sort of, information like a password or something in addition to that. Okay. Managing passwords, I heard that all this stuff they make us do with the length of the password and so many characters and so many, symbols and all that it doesn't work. The person that came up with all this, it turns out they were wrong. Okay, so all that hassle they're making you go through turns out is a very ineffective means of managing access to a system. But we have to manage passwords. I'm not going to go through this because I think if you've logged into a system at some point in time, you've been told that you violated one of these, and so that's pretty self-explanatory as to how those work. Okay, access controls. Access controls, you can be able to create or write. You can have read-only. You can have update access, delete, right? And so I'm sure you have dealt with the situation where you've gone in to do a certain action on a file and you were denied the ability to do that because you don't have that sort of access. Okay, coming over, personnel changes, something worth flashcarding because this is something that I think companies fall down on and that they don't do a very good job of once somebody leaves the organization of removing their access to certain systems. And so that's something that should absolutely be done. You shouldn't be able to go back to your job 3 jobs ago and still be able to enter into an old system where you've left the organization. Okay, looking at network security, okay, and firewall. Okay, firewall is a way to avoid unauthorized access, and flashcard that a firewall could be software and or hardware. I was on an assignment one time where, again, it was that same assignment, actually, the corporate credit unions, where we asked to see the firewall of one of the entities, and it was a very small credit union, and they took us and they basically opened a closet and showed us this device up there that was supposedly their firewall. And the problem that I had is like this credit union was in Montana. It was like in a house. And I'm like, well, it was like walking in someone's house, and it was supposedly a corporate credit union. And I'm like, well, guys, you're responsible, even though you're a small corporate credit union. Remember, you have the responsibility for distributing transactions out as a clearinghouse to all these other credit unions. You're sitting here in a building that you could drive a Volkswagen through if you wanted to. So the recommendation was they needed to put up some sort of, physical security around that credit union. Even though they were small, it didn't mean that it wouldn't have some sort of reputation effect to the corporate credit union structure if you had something taken out, and then, thousands of the other credit unions customers were affected by that. Okay. All right, good. So you get some of these guys start to get a little bit, repetition of what we talked about, hardening and whatnot, encryption, these sort of things. So I think what I want to do actually is stop, because we can't finish this module in the time that's left. And so I think this is a good breaking point in which we'll pick up, and somebody remind me if I forget next time, we'll pick up with segregation of duties, because that is something that I want to talk about as we talk about an IT system and the different roles of individuals within that system and how we have to keep those separated. I could see them getting into that. We haven't really talked much about that at this point. So let's stop there. You still have the information to take you all the way up through module 5. We'll finish this next time for sure. And then this chapter, and then what we'll do is we'll start to jump into some of that final review stuff. If you have the book, if you received the book and you kind of threw it on the kitchen table or something, go find it now and have that book available for you next time, for those that want to, kind of go along with me and mark up as we go along. Okay, question? Okay, guys, if there's nothing else, then have a good evening, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
night.
one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.